Walter Stitt Jr. fought in World War II as an American tank crewman. He endured multiple battles, survived 3 destroyed tanks, and was wounded twice, sent back to the front line again and again. In tank warfare, survival wasn't about courage alone. It came down to seconds, inches, and being in the right place at the right time. This is his story. Walter Stitt Jr. grew up in West Virginia. On December 7th, 1941, he came home from a movie with his best friend and knew immediately something was wrong. His friend's father looked at them and said Pearl Harbor had been attacked. America was at war, and once Walter graduated from high school, the path was already set. He registered for the draft, and not long after, he was sent to Fort Hays in Columbus, Ohio for training. He arrived in civilian clothes. The next morning, each man was handed a box and told to write his home address on it. Walter folded his clothes, placed them inside, and watched the box as it was taken away. That was the last time he saw them. Before the army, Walter had been driving delivery trucks. His father gave him one piece of advice.
My father said, "Don't tell them you're a truck driver, tell them you're a student. Maybe they'll send you to school."
When Walter sat down for assignment, he made one request.
I said I didn't want anything with a steering wheel.
The officer looked at his record anyways and handed him his orders. When Walter arrived, he asked the first soldier he saw what kind of unit it was. The answer was simple: tanks.
I still think that officer was probably laughing. He didn't give me something with steering wheels because tanks had levers.
A Sherman tank was split into 2 spaces, the hull below and the turret above. The driver and the bow gunner were boxed into the hull, while the rest of the crew worked inside the turret. A cramped steel cylinder with barely any room to move. That was where Walter lived. He was the loader. His job was to handle the shells, lifting them, guiding them into place, and clearing away before the gun fired. Every movement had to be exact.
It was crowded, that's for sure. There was very little space, but we were all young and agile, and we managed.
When they went into combat, they didn't leave the tank at night. They slept inside it, wedging blankets against the armor and leaning wherever they could.
You'd run a blanket up against the side and lean against it. We were young, and we could finally get comfortable and sleep.
Getting out of the tank was another matter. In the turret, there was only one hatch, where the tank commander stood to look for targets. If they had to escape quickly, there was an order. Commander first, then the gunner, then the loader.
The loader had to get underneath the recoil guard on the cannon. He was the third one out.
When Walter arrived in France, it was about a month after D-Day. Before long, he was assigned to a Sherman tank as a loader. His only view of the outside world was a periscope, a narrow slit of vision he could turn left and right, up and down. But most of the time, even that didn't matter, because his focus stayed inside the tank and on his job.
When I got assigned into a tank as a loader, I should emphasize, the loader didn't have a hatch to get out.
His view of what was happening around him was limited, and usually he was too busy to look anyways. If the tank went into combat, he had to be ready to grab whatever ammunition the tank commander called for without hesitation. The other men in the tank were veterans. They had already been in combat and they didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about the old loader and who had been there before him.
Whatever happened to the other loader, I never found out. I never asked. They never said.
It wasn't discussed. Walter had a job and he did it. After a series of short skirmishes, the unit drove through the night, and by morning they were already outside Mons, Belgium. Alongside American infantry, they surrounded the city and captured a large number of German soldiers. It was there that Walter came face to face with a German soldier for the first time.
The first German I had any contact with was a young kid. He couldn't have been more than 14 or 15.
The boy was a prisoner, sitting on the front of a jeep, holding a crucifix in his hands, his body shaking uncontrollably.
He was sitting there just shaking like this, scared to death. I wanted to tell him, don't worry, we're not going to shoot you, we're going to feed you, we'll put you in a prison camp.
But Walter didn't speak German, so he said nothing. The moment passed, and the war moved on. As the weeks passed, the fighting intensified. Tanks didn't keep crews for long. When a seat opened, someone filled it straight away. Walter moved into the gunner's position, and everything changed. As a loader, his job had been physical and constant. He handled shells, fed ammunition, stayed ready, but he never saw what he was firing at.
When you move into the gunner seat, you got the crosshairs, and the first time you step on that trigger, you know you're going to kill somebody.
It wasn't easy, but war didn't wait for comfort. Once they fired, and once the Germans fired back, hesitation disappeared. Survival replaced thought. Combat came faster, then faster. It wasn't long before a deadly exchange knocked out Walter's first tank. From out of nowhere, a German shell tore through the turret, killing the tank commander and another crewman instantly. Their bodies collapsed into the turret and onto Walter.
The shell went right through the turret. They were instantly killed.
Walter had no hatch. The only way out was beneath the cannon, through the recoil guard, but bodies blocked his escape. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw daylight. The driver had already escaped. Walter dropped into the hull, got out of the tank and ran. He was unarmed and exposed on the front line. From the side of a bank, the driver and the bow gunner shouted to him, asking about the tank commander and the other crewman, Reevy. Walter shook his head and kept moving. Suddenly, he tripped on a root and went down hard, his shoulder coming out of his joint. He forced it back in and then saw blood running down his leg. An American tank was nearby. Walter ran to it and asked for a bandage. As he climbed up to get in, a German soldier opened fire with a submachine gun.
I turned quick, spotted him, and yelled to the tank commander where he was.
The turret swung in the German's direction. One shot quickly ended the threat. Walter wrapped his leg and ran for a half-dug foxhole. A medic found him soon after, asked if he could walk, and sent him back to the half-track to a field hospital with other wounded men. They treated his leg, gave him a shot, and kept him overnight. The next day, Walter returned to his company.
The first sergeant said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Tank got hit." He asked if anybody got hurt. I said, "Yeah, the lieutenant and Rebbe."
Once Walter reached his company, he lay down in the grass to rest. Not long after, the first sergeant returned with news of another tank. For a moment, Walter was told he'd be the tank commander. Then the order changed.
He said, "I hate to do this to you, but you know how badly they need tanks." I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Okay, you're the gunner."
Within 24 hours of losing his tank, Walter was back on the front line, in a new tank, with a different crew. There was no time to process what he'd just seen. The fighting was moving east, and replacements were needed immediately. Then came the Ardennes. Winter closed in fast. Snow buried the forests, roads turned into ice, and engines struggled in the snow. This was the Battle of the Bulge. A sudden German offensive that threw entire American units into chaos. Supply lines were thin, positions shifted by the hour. Nothing felt secure. Walter's unit was sent forward to help hold the line.
It was simple. They weren't taking any of us alive, so it was them or us.
They were facing German SS troops, seasoned soldiers who had been fighting for years. In tank combat, hesitation meant death, and Walter was still the gunner. His tank advanced as part of a column pushing toward Bastogne, toward the surrounded paratroopers of the 101st Airborne, or the famous Band of Brothers. Walter's tank was fifth in line as they moved downhill toward a T intersection. Then, they spotted a German column crossing the road ahead. At the rear, a truck was towing an 88mm gun. The leader of the column, Lieutenant Hope, ordered for a high explosive round to be loaded and told the driver to accelerate. They came around the corner at speed and fired. The German gun crew never had time to react. The 88 vanished in an explosion that lit up the road like the 4th of July. The column moved on, but soon came to a halt as the road ahead was blocked. When the order finally came to move again, the tanks edged forward one by one. When Walter's tank followed, he had forgotten to switch the power traverse back on. As a result, the cannon swung freely and slammed into the bank, forcing them to stop and check the barrel for dirt as the rest of the column moved forward. By the time Walter's tank reached the village, the first 4 had already passed beneath a railroad underpass. On the far side, the German tanks were waiting for them and opened fire. Within minutes, the first 4 tanks were destroyed.
They picked them all up and killed Lieutenant Hope, and it was his first day in combat, which was sad.
Walter's tank stopped short of the underpass. If they had been anything other than the 5th tank in the column, he would not have survived. The war didn't reward bravery, it rewarded timing. And sometimes, luck was the only difference between living and dying. Walter's final day inside a Sherman tank came in a small Belgian village. The streets were narrow with stone walls and little room to maneuver. They moved cautiously, firing into upper windows and clearing buildings as they advanced. When the tank commanders spotted movement inside a house ahead, they fired. Once close enough, he tossed in a grenade. A German soldier burst out the front door and was shot down. They then crossed the road and climbed over a low fence into open ground. Nearby, American infantry began taking small arms fire from another house. The commander ordered Walter to swing the gun. Walter brought the turret around, scanning through the periscope. That was when a German soldier stood up in the open, carrying a Panzerfaust. The first shot missed the tank, but exploded among the infantry. Men went down screaming, bleeding from their legs and faces. The commander immediately called for the gun again. Walter leaned forward, trying to bring the crosshairs onto the target. He could see the German clearly through the periscope, but before he could fire, the second shot came.
It hit right behind my head.
The blast slammed into the turret. Walter was leaning forward at the moment of impact. The force drove backward through the tank, killing the tank commander instantly. His fist struck Walter in the back of the head as he collapsed forward and slumped inside the turret. The turret jammed. The gun would not traverse. Walter could still see the Germans standing there in the open. Outside, American infantrymen shouted and pointed, yelling where he was, but no one fired.
They were shouting, but nobody fired. I understood why. It's hard to pull that trigger.
With the commander dead and the tank helpless, there was nothing more they could do. Walter climbed out of the tank under fire, the loader close behind him. He shouted for the infantry to get inside the nearest house and away from the windows. Inside, they bandaged each other as best they could. As the adrenaline faded, Walter felt his head grow cold. He reached up and pulled his hand back, wet with blood. The journey away from combat finally began. He was sent to Liège, then on to Paris, to the coast, and finally back across the Channel to England. Walter would not return to frontline combat again. Years later, when asked what he was most proud of, Walter said,
I never think about it from that angle. Proud? I don't know. I think I did what I was called to do. I guess I could be proud of that.
Walter Stitt Jr. survived 3 destroyed tanks. He was wounded twice, and he watched men die inches away from him. And when the war finally let him go, he went home. This is his story, and this is his legacy.